In the spring of 1940, the world watched in silence as Europe fell. Paris surrendered without a shot. Then the sky above London turned to fire. How did civilization walk to the edge of the abyss? Hello, I'm Dr. Jonathan H. Kingswell, Professor of Global Military History. I invite you to witness this chapter of history. The Great War had promised to be the war to end all wars. But when the guns finally fell silent in 1918, they left behind a world shattered beyond recognition. Tens of millions were dead or wounded. Entire cities lay in ruins. Empires that had stood for centuries had crumbled overnight. From the mud-soaked trenches of France to the broken streets of Berlin, people returned home not to peace, but to uncertainty, grief, and ruin. A generation of young men was lost, a generation of hope extinguished. As the victors rejoiced, the vanquished were humiliated. But the war had not healed the world, it had scarred it. And in those scars, new storms were already gathering. In 1919, world leaders gathered in the opulent halls of Versailles to forge peace. But what emerged from those gilded rooms was not healing, it was punishment. Germany, humiliated and excluded from the talks, was forced to accept full responsibility for the war. The Treaty of Versailles stripped her of land, colonies, and pride. It dismantled her army, demanded impossible reparations, and branded a generation with guilt. For many Germans, it wasn't peace, it was betrayal. The economy collapsed, inflation soared, bread lines stretched across cities once proud and industrial. In the shadows, a dangerous idea began to take root. That Germany had not been defeated, but stabbed in the back. This lie, the stab in the back myth, would become a weapon. And in the chaos of resentment and ruin, demagogues waited. Out of the chaos of defeat, Germany tried something new, democracy. The Weimar Republic was born, fragile, hopeful, and immediately under siege. From the start, it was blamed for the humiliating peace. Its leaders were called traitors. Assassinations, riots, and failed coups scarred its early years. Then came disaster. In 1929, the global economy collapsed. American banks pulled their loans, German factories closed, unemployment soared. With every job lost, with every empty plate, the people lost faith. Extremists offered simple answers. The communists promised revolution. The Nazis promised rebirth. In the space between fear and desperation, Germany's fragile democracy began to die, not with bullets, but with ballots. Amid the ruins of democracy, one man rose, a failed artist, a soldier of the Great War, a master of rhetoric. Adolf Hitler promised strength, unity, and vengeance. He blamed the Jews, the communists, the Treaty of Versailles. To the desperate, it sounded like truth. The Nazi Party, once a fringe movement, surged in the polls. In 1933, Hitler was appointed Chancellor, not through revolution, but through the very democracy he vowed to destroy. Within weeks, he moved fast. The Reichstag fire gave him the excuse. Civil liberties were suspended. The Enabling Act gave him absolute power. Political parties were outlawed. Critics vanished. And with chilling efficiency, a democracy died. And a dictatorship was born. As Hitler consolidated power, Europe watched, nervous but unwilling to act. Germany rearmed in secret, then in open defiance of the Treaty of Versailles. The League of Nations protested and did nothing. In 1936, Hitler marched troops into the Rhineland. France, though stronger, did not respond. Emboldened, the Nazi regime grew bolder. Then came Austria. In 1938, Hitler annexed his homeland. The Anschluss was greeted with salutes, not bullets. That same year, he demanded the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia. Britain and France, desperate to avoid war, gave in. At Munich, Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain returned waving a treaty promising peace for our time. But peace had already died. What Hitler saw was not strength but fear, and he would push further, again and again.
Herr Hitler. And here is the paper which bears his name upon it as well as mine. We regard the agreement signed last night and the Anglo-German naval agreement as symbolic of the desire of our two peoples never to go to war with one another again.
By the end of 1938, Hitler had redrawn the map of Europe without firing a single shot. The Treaty of Versailles lay in tatters, the League of Nations silent and powerless. Germany now bordered Poland, and Hitler's ambitions were clear. He wanted more, much more. Meanwhile, Italy had invaded Ethiopia. Japan had occupied parts of China. The world was unraveling, but no one wanted to see it. In the West, leaders clung to the illusion that diplomacy would prevail. In the East, Stalin watched warily, preparing for the worst. By 1939, Europe was a powder keg. The fuse was lit, and the world was sleepwalking into fire.
Peace in our time! Read all about it! Peace
Europe stood on the edge. In London and Paris, newspapers still preached peace. In Berlin, Hitler made final preparations. In Moscow, Stalin remained silent. And in Warsaw, no one knew what was coming. Diplomats met, treaties were signed, but nothing could stop what had already begun. The world held its breath. The pieces were in place. The alliances were forged. The justifications were fabricated. All that was needed was a single spark. And on the last night of peace, August 31st, 1939, that spark was manufactured by the Nazis themselves. In a staged operation known as the Gleiwitz incident, German SS commandos, dressed in Polish uniforms, attacked a German radio station on the border, broadcasting anti-German messages and leaving behind bodies of concentration camp prisoners to serve as proof of Polish aggression. This total war no longer required drawn-out formations. The hands of the clock ticked forward in absolute darkness, and the world held its breath in the heavy silence of the borders. Seconds later, that silence was shattered forever. At exactly 4:45 in the morning, the sky over Poland exploded. German planes screamed overhead, diving toward their targets with terrifying sirens. These were the Stukas, dive bombers designed to terrify as much as destroy. Their first strikes hit Polish airfields, catching planes on the ground before they could even get off the runway. On the ground, German tanks smashed through the border, fast, light, and deadly. These weren't the giant armored beasts of later battles. They were smaller, but moved with shocking speed, driving straight past strongholds to get deep into Polish territory. Behind them came trucks packed with soldiers, radio teams, and engineers. The whole invasion moved like a single machine, aircraft, tanks, and infantry working together in perfect coordination. This was Blitzkrieg, lightning war. It wasn't just about winning, it was about overwhelming the enemy so fast they couldn't even fight back. And it worked. Within hours, entire units were cut off. Communications collapsed. Chaos spread. It was clear this wasn't going to be a slow, trench-style war. This was something entirely new and far more terrifying. The Polish army didn't give up. Outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded, they still fought with incredible bravery. In the west, near the Bzura River, Polish forces launched a bold counterattack, the largest of the war for them. It surprised the Germans and pushed them back, at least for a short time. In Warsaw, ordinary people, shopkeepers, students, even children, joined the defense. They built barricades, dug trenches, and prepared for a brutal siege. The Polish cavalry, often misunderstood, didn't charge tanks with swords. They acted as fast-moving infantry, fighting wherever they were needed. But no matter how hard they fought, the truth was harsh. Their weapons were outdated. Their air support was almost gone, and they were facing a modern war machine built for speed and destruction. What Poland had was heart, but heart alone wasn't enough. Just when things couldn't get worse for Poland, they did. On September 17, 1939, Poland was hit from the other side. The Soviet Union, following a secret deal made with Hitler, sent its army across Poland's eastern border. The Soviets claimed they were protecting Ukrainian and Belarusian people, but everyone knew the truth. This was a planned attack. For Polish leaders and soldiers, it was devastating. Their country was already under extreme pressure from the West. Now they were being crushed from both sides. Some Polish soldiers didn't even know who to fight anymore, Germans or Soviets. With this second invasion, Poland's hope of survival was nearly gone. It was now trapped between two of the most powerful and brutal dictatorships in the world. After weeks of fighting, Poland was broken. In the west, German tanks had reached the gates of Warsaw. In the east, the Soviets had taken town after town. Polish soldiers, caught between two brutal enemies, were exhausted and outnumbered. In the capital, civilians endured constant bombings. Buildings crumbled, fires raged, food and water became scarce, but the people didn't give up easily. They dug trenches, built barricades, and prepared to fight street by street. On September 27th, after a long siege, Warsaw surrendered. Across the country, the last pockets of resistance fell. Poland, once a proud and independent nation, had been erased from the map. Its land was carved up by two dictators, and its people left to suffer under occupation. The first campaign of the war had ended, not with victory for freedom, but with a chilling preview of what was to come.
Der Feldzug ist erfolgreich abgeschlossen. Polen ist unter Kontrolle.
With Poland crushed, the world waited. Britain and France had promised to defend Poland if it was attacked. Now the test had come. On September 1st, both countries sent a final warning to Germany: stop the invasion and pull back. But Hitler said nothing. He believed the West wouldn't dare start another war. For 2 long days, diplomats rushed between offices. Telegrams flew. Hopes faded. In Berlin, the silence from Hitler spoke louder than any words. In London and Paris, leaders gathered in tense rooms, watching the hours pass. The world stood still, watching, waiting. Everyone knew what was coming, but no one wanted to say it. Time ran out. On the morning of September 3rd, 1939, the British ultimatum expired. At exactly 11:15 a.m., Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain went live on the radio. His voice was tired. His words were calm, but final. Britain was now at war with Germany. There were no cheers, no flags, only silence. People gathered around radios. They didn't celebrate. They listened, quietly, nervously. They remembered 1914. They knew what war really meant.
I am speaking to you from the Cabinet Room at 10 Downing Street. This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland. A state of war, I have to tell you now, that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
Just hours later, France declared war too. The old alliances were active again, but this time there was no illusion of a short, clean fight. This war already felt different, darker, heavier. It was the start of something terrible, a moment when words ended and war began.
I will return to you.
Be safe, my love.
After the declarations, Europe braced for impact. But instead of bombs and battles, there was silence. For almost 8 months, from the fall of Poland until spring 1940, the Western Front stayed still. The British press called it the Phoney War. To the Germans, it was Blitzkrieg, the sitting war. Millions of troops waited in bunkers and trenches, watching the empty fields between them. No major battles, no invasions. Just a strange, uneasy quiet. The French trusted their Maginot Line, an expensive wall of concrete and steel, thinking it would stop any German attack. The Germans waited too, building strength. And in the air, instead of bombs, Allied planes dropped leaflets, pamphlets trying to change minds, not destroy cities. It felt like a war in name only, but beneath that calm, something was brewing, and it would strike with the full force of Blitzkrieg. While Europe waited on land, the war had already begun at sea. On the very first day, a German U-boat torpedoed the SS Athenia, a passenger ship. Civilians were now targets. The Battle of the Atlantic had started, and it would become the longest campaign of the entire war. British and German ships hunted each other in deadly cat-and-mouse games across dark, freezing waters. The Royal Navy imposed a tight blockade on Germany, cutting off vital supplies. The Kriegsmarine, in turn, sent U-boats to sink Allied convoys. Torpedoes struck without warning. Ships vanished beneath the waves. It was silent, terrifying, and deadly. And in December 1939 came the first dramatic naval clash. British cruisers trapped the German pocket battleship Admiral Graf Spee at the River Plate near South America. The Germans scuttled their ship rather than surrender. But the war wasn't just at sea. In the far north, Stalin had turned his eyes toward Finland. In November, the Red Army invaded. The Finns were outnumbered, but not outmatched. Wearing white camouflage, they fought in frozen forests, using skis, hit-and-run tactics, and unmatched knowledge of the terrain. It became known as the Winter War. The world watched in awe as small Finland held off the mighty Soviet Union for weeks. Eventually, the Soviets prevailed, but not without heavy losses and global embarrassment. For the people of Europe, it was clear the war was spreading and the battles were getting closer. After the fall of Poland, a strange stillness returned to the West. But beneath that calm, plans were being made. Plans that would soon change the course of history. While British and French forces dug in behind the Maginot Line, Hitler and his generals were already thinking ahead. They studied maps, seeking a bold way to strike west. Spring 1940. For 8 long months, Europe had waited. No major battles, no breakthroughs, just silence and fear. They called it the Phoney War. France and Britain thought their defenses would hold. Behind the Maginot Line, soldiers relaxed, confident. They believed time was on their side. But in Germany, Hitler was planning something else. Not a slow war of waiting, but a fast, brutal strike that would shock the world. And his first move wasn't toward Paris. It was north, toward the cold and quiet lands of Scandinavia. April 9th, 1940. Without warning, German forces struck north into Denmark and Norway. Denmark was caught completely off guard. No defenses, no resistance. In just 6 hours, it surrendered. But Norway was different. Its mountains, fjords, and freezing waters made it harder to take. German ships landed troops at key ports. Paratroopers fell from the skies. Fighting broke out in snowy valleys and narrow streets. The goal? To take control of the coast and protect the iron ore coming from Sweden. a vital resource for Germany's war machine. The British and French rushed to help, but they were slow, confused, and too late. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, they had to retreat. This was Germany's first true test of modern war, and they passed with brutal precision. In Berlin, a daring new operation took shape.
Beginnen Sie mit der Operation Fallgelb.
Rather than attack the heavily defended French border, the Germans would push through Belgium and the thick, hilly forests of the Ardennes. The Allies believed that region was impassable for tanks. Hitler planned to prove them wrong. It was a gamble, fast, risky, and ambitious.
Nos fortifications ici sont imprenables. Nos anciennes lignes tiendront.
But Blitzkrieg had worked once, and the Wehrmacht was ready to do it again, this time on an even larger scale. As winter gave way to spring, the tension across Europe thickened. The storm that had begun in Poland was about to roll west. The waiting was over. The war was about to erupt again, louder, faster, and more brutal than before. May 10th, 1940, Germany launched a massive assault on the west. Their tanks rolled into Belgium, the Netherlands and Luxembourg, and the Allies rushed to stop them. French and British forces moved north, thinking they were meeting the main attack. But they were wrong. The real blow was coming from a different place, from the Ardennes forest. It was thick, hilly, and barely defended. Military leaders had believed tanks couldn't pass through it. They were wrong too. Thousands of German tanks pushed through the forest with shocking speed. They raced toward the English Channel, aiming to trap the best Allied armies from behind. This wasn't a traditional attack. It was fast, focused, and devastating. They called it the sickle cut, and it was working. By late May, the trap was closed. Hundreds of thousands of Allied soldiers were surrounded at Dunkirk, with the sea behind them and German forces closing in. Defeat seemed certain. But then something unexpected happened. Hitler ordered his tanks to stop. No one knows exactly why. Maybe he feared a counterattack, or maybe he wanted the Air Force to finish the job. Whatever the reason, the pause gave the Allies time. The British launched a rescue mission, Operation Dynamo. Navy ships raced across the channel, but they weren't alone. Hundreds of civilian boats, fishing vessels, ferries, tiny sailboats joined the mission. Through bombs and fire, they kept coming. What could have been a total disaster turned into a miracle of courage. They saved over 330,000 lives. Dunkirk was a rescue, not a victory. The British army escaped, but left behind tanks, trucks, and weapons. France was now wide open. German forces pushed forward with little resistance. On June 14th, Paris was declared an open city. German troops entered without a fight. A week later, in a forest north of Paris, Hitler staged his revenge. In the same railway carriage where Germany had surrendered in 1918, he made the French surrender to him. It was humiliation, plain and complete. In the forest of Compiègne, on 22nd of June 1940, Hitler restaged the scene of 1918. Railcar 2419D, the very carriage where Germany had signed the armistice at the end of the First World War, was hauled back to the clearing. Hitler stepped inside, sat briefly in Marshal Foch's seat, and had a preamble read aloud, reminding the French of 1918. Then, without negotiation, he rose and walked out, leaving Field Marshal Keitel and the German delegation to dictate the terms. The message was deliberate, not only defeat but humiliation. In just 6 weeks, the German army had crushed one of the strongest nations in Europe, and Hitler stood at the peak of his power. By the summer of 1940, France was gone. Hitler's flag flew over most of Europe, from Warsaw to Paris, and across the English Channel, only one country still stood: Britain, alone. The Soviet Union had signed a pact with Germany, and the United States refused to join the war. Britain had rescued its army, but lost its foothold on the continent. Now it faced invasion. German generals made plans. Hitler believed the British would give up, but Britain had a new leader, one who refused to quit: Winston Churchill. He told the nation to expect no comfort, only blood, toil, tears, and sweat. Hitler thought Britain would surrender, but when they refused, he gave the order, prepare for invasion. The plan was called Operation Sea Lion. German troops would land on British beaches, but there was a problem. The Royal Navy still ruled the sea. To cross the Channel, Germany first needed control of the skies. If the Luftwaffe could destroy the Royal Air Force, then the invasion might succeed. So before the soldiers could land, the air war had to begin. The future of Britain would be decided above the clouds. The Battle of Britain began in July 1940. At first, German planes attacked ships in the Channel, trying to draw the RAF into the air. Then came the main assault. They called it Eagle Day. Wave after wave of bombers and fighters hit airfields and radar stations. The goal: crush fighter command, destroy the planes, exhaust the pilots. But Britain had an edge. A new system linked radar towers, observers, and command centers. It gave them early warnings. It told them when and where to fight. This wasn't just muscle, it was strategy. And the people flying those Spitfires and Hurricanes, they came from everywhere. Britain, Poland, Canada, Czechoslovakia. We remember them as the few. Then came a mistake, one that changed everything. A German bomber flying at night got lost and dropped its bombs on London by accident. In response, Churchill ordered a raid on Berlin. It caused little damage, but it hit Hitler's pride. He was furious. He changed strategy. No more airfields, no more radar stations. Now the target was London. Day and night the city burned. For 57 nights the Blitz rained fire. Families hid underground. Firefighters battled endless flames. But while the people suffered, the RAF caught a break. The pressure on their bases eased, and Britain somehow kept standing. September 15th, 1940. Germany launched its biggest daylight attack yet. They believed the RAF was finished, that this would break Britain. But they were wrong. British fighters rose to meet them, fewer in number, but full of fight. In the skies over London, the RAF struck hard. Dozens of German bombers were shot down. It was a turning point. Operation Sea Lion was postponed and never launched. For the first time, Hitler had been stopped. Britain was still standing. The danger wasn't over, but hope had returned. This was the moment when a nation refused to fall. It was their finest hour. Thank you for watching this episode, from the outbreak of war to the Battle of Britain. If this story stayed with you, consider supporting the channel. Your support helps keep these important stories alive and accessible to all. Stay curious, stay aware, and let history guide your understanding.